Hi, welcome to the first and inaugural Whole Note podcast. I'm super excited to be joined by my dear friend and internationally renowned pianist, Albert Cano Smit. Albert, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. That's a very flattering opening.
um, so Albert, you're obviously someone that many of our listeners will already know through your performances, whether on YouTube or having seen you in person. And so I'm not even going to try and talk about your accomplishments. I will leave that for the description with your full bio below. But I'm curious because a lot of our listeners will only have known you from your stage persona. So can we talk a little bit about Albert, the person behind the stage or backstage?
Again, I feel like so much like a celebrity, and it's really not the case. But thank you. I don't know. I mean, it's just like in music. It's sort of hard to judge how one's own character is. I have been told. I remember we were discussing this at some point that in some occasions, or on some occasions, I should say, I went on stage and then I met people who were at the concert, and they were surprised that I was not apparently I look very serious on stage or something, very unfriendly and very a little severe. No, and I actually I guess I'm quite silly in real life. The people who know me would say.
Yeah.
And I love being around people and talking to people, and it's I'm not, I guess, that serious a person, or there's different sides of me. So I think that's probably the most consistent thing I've ever got from people from my friends.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't know. I'm like just like any other person. I love sports, or like many people I know. I love literature, movies. I waste a lot of time, like a lot of people do nowadays. I wish it was less, and I keep always trying. Um, but I just really, really, really love music. So I love listening to music when I'm backstage or at home.
Right.
I guess that's a little boring. Um, and I don't know. I'm a little bit obsessive, maybe, with things. I guess that's also a similarity between the being on stage and backstage. And it's ever since I was a kid, I was a little bit like this. Like I would have a passion, and then I would really be obsessed with that to a fault. So, and some of them were passing. So I was obsessed for a while, and then I would sort of lose interest, and then some of them stayed forever. And that's
Right.
music, obviously, has
Right.
always been there. And also aviation. Some people would be surprised, maybe,
Aviation?
to hear. I love aviation. I mean, I love airplanes.
Okay.
I wanted to do aeronautical engineering at some point.
Okay.
Then I wanted to be a pilot. I had my simulator. And two people in my family actually in Holland are pilots
Okay.
currently, and one of my good friends from my primary school, actually, I think in Spain, is now a pilot too. And we were, doing simulator things at the same time when I was in Spain. But anyway, that's all. I guess when I got into music, I sort of, there's not so much time for the other passions, or there hasn't been so far, but I hope in the future I can do something about it.
Yeah. That's interesting. So I guess your love for planes helps alleviate all the traveling you do, right?
A little bit, yeah. It's I remember, yeah, the first time I ever got on a transatlantic flight, it was like, the biggest event in my life so far. I think it was going to audition in one of the schools in America. Yeah, it was so fascinated. And I guess that's yeah, I have to, I mean, we have to take a lot of airplanes because we
Right.
have to go to wherever our office is in different places always. So it's always, I have fun flying. I don't like so much. I got into a point where I feel so old saying this, but I don't really like going to and from airports and sort of waiting in line, and I'm very
Yeah.
impatient. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
maybe that's another part of me that's speaking to your earlier question. I'm a little bit impulsive sometimes
Yeah.
and a little bit impatient. Um, so I have to find a middle line. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you came to the piano?
Mhm. I guess it's a very common story. I mean, my parents are not musical, but my mother did play the piano, and I feel like my dad had sort of an artistic side to him that was expressed in various ways through our childhood. So they bought an electric keyboard when my sister and I were young, and then my sister took lessons because she was older first, and then she taught me, and I started because of her. I don't know if it was a competitive vein or something, and or maybe I don't know, maybe I just admired her, or whatever it may be. But yeah, and I remember I fell in love with it from the first minute. I was not practicing. I mean, I would take lessons, but I would cram all my practice until the day of the lesson in the morning, and then I would panic before my lesson. But I really, really, really love music. I feel like that's been the same from the first day too until now. I remember playing some pieces and having some kind of undescribable feeling, and living life during that period of time 100 times fuller than any time I was not at the piano. And being very bored sometimes outside of the piano, but then when I was playing, I would feel things that are, I mean, it's like a whole different world that you're able to enter. It doesn't mean I was good at it. It just meant it was like a route for that. It's kind of a mystery a little bit for me. But it seems to be a pattern for everyone who plays piano professionally, or who has done, or cello or any other instrument. I feel like that I think that must have been there from the beginning. And then my parents were very supportive in trying to find ways to continue my education. So I went to a monastery in Montserrat. It's called the Escolania de Montserrat, and it's actually a Catholic school. And it's not that my parents were extremely religious or anything like that, but it was a very good musical education, and I feel like a very, very good overall human education that everyone who went there got. I mean, being a boarding school, of course, there's discipline, things that you learned from the first day, and living with 50 other boys in top of a mountain. It's kind of a lesson. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, there I started doing a lot of chamber music and singing in a choir, and not really focusing on piano or piano technique. I guess I wish I did more of that earlier, but maybe I would have ended up hating the piano, or maybe I would have loved it even more. I don't know. It's kind of not having had very severe teachers at the time could have been a blessing, but I was also very lazy. I feel like I'm a little bit extreme. I'm either very lazy or very, very obsessed. So it's kind of a danger zone. But yeah, that was that was 5 years there were very transformative. And then at a human level.
Was that like around the time you finished primary school and ended up?
Yes. That's right. I think it was from 8 to 13 until your voice breaks, and then you have to leave. And then after that, I went to the UK because I found this teacher who was teaching at a school in Manchester, who I remember. I guess my dad found this place, and I got a scholarship to go study there, and it was on another boarding school actually. And there was this Polish teacher who for some reason heard me, and she believed I had talent, which I thought maybe in my little town in Spain, I'm really honestly, I thought maybe I had it because no one else was really playing, but I didn't really think I would be close to doing anything in the music world. But she really believed in me, and I guess that made me believe in myself. And it's very important to have someone like that. And she taught me very important things, and that sort of catapulted the move to the UK. And that was 4 years, and then that's where I didn't know what to do with my life, whether to pursue aviation or piano. Then I ended up going to Colburn, which was free also, and then to Juilliard, and I've stayed in New York ever since.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned chamber music a little bit, and even in your earlier days. And that's great because, you know, Albert, what I admire so much about you, among so many other things, is as a pianist, you're one of the few. I mean, I think our generation is becoming more open to playing chamber music as a pianist, but you're someone that really takes it on and does such a wholehearted, amazing job with chamber music. So I'm really curious, how has your work in chamber music shaped who you are as a musician today?
It's a great question. Also, thank you. You're so kind, and I hope we get to play together. It's a very good question, and I guess it's hard to answer, but I just know chamber music is very important to me,
Yeah.
and it has been for since the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe that's to do with this monastery upbringing,
Yeah.
where it was all chamber music, either
Right.
in the choir or in playing. But I feel like, well, I'm very glad that it's this. I feel like in the past decades ago, it was either you're a soloist or you're
Yeah.
a chamber musician, or
Exactly.
and I
Yeah.
feel like that's sort of changing a little bit.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the music that you play, it's we're so lucky as pianists.
Yeah.
And part of it for me that has drawn me to chamber music is just loving the repertoire that you get to play that's not for solo piano.
Yeah.
I mean, it's endless. Another part of it, obviously, is the chamber musicians I've been able to collaborate with,
Right.
and I really mean it. It has been very, very inspiring.
Mm.
I remember being getting out of some collaborations, and for a week after, sort of seeing music in a different way, and it's hard to explain why, I guess, because it's a very deeply human connection.
Yeah.
It's something to do with maybe their identification with the music that you're playing.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like having a three-way conversation with a composer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were like eavesdropping into something like this, you would almost be part of it without doing anything.
Yeah.
So chamber has that component, I feel, but it also has challenges. I mean, sometimes some collaborations are tough, and you can also learn from them.
Right.
And yeah, I feel like it's great to collaborate with non-pianists, because a lot of what we try to do with our instrument actually is imitating with something that other instruments do much more easily. So having that in your ear is great. And also, while you learn things about phrasing from certain people, you learn things about just the intensity or the energy that they bring to the music.
Right.
You get so many fresh ideas from people that you play with. And then whenever you have a tough time in a collaboration, you also learn about trying to analyze why you're having a tough time, and trying to look at the music, and then questioning yourself and questioning what you're doing, and maybe realizing that because when you play with someone who's great, they also adapt to you a little bit, which makes things easier for you, and it makes you think you're doing a great job, and maybe it's not always the case. So I don't know. I always enjoyed that part of doing something together with someone else in music. Yeah, I feel like well, I don't know. It's like it's also so clear in many piano writing passages where it's supposed to sound like a string quartet. Or like different roles of different voices. They're also more clear in your music. So in a way, that's easier. Yeah. And then on the other hand, it's also harder being at the mercy of what the other person does, and especially if you struggle with something technically, you're like you I mean you have to compromise a little bit. So it's a bit of a sacrifice and a gain, and it makes things interesting.
Well, and it's interesting because I think in recent years I've really thought about this more, and I think chamber music in its most pure art form is kind of the backbone of like all classical music, whether it be playing symphonic literature, even solo pieces. Like last year I was working quite intensively on some Bach suites, and it's obviously for one instrument, but the way Bach wrote that music, it was chamber music because he wrote lines for different voices. It just happened to be on one instrument. And I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way with your solo piano literature, where
absolutely,
I mean, you have 10 fingers, and it's almost like you have a little mini orchestra within your hands. And so, I mean, it's one of those things, kind of what we were talking about before, where in previous generations, I think if you were classified as a chamber musician or purely chamber musician, there was almost kind of like a stigma to it. Like, oh, like you're not a solo musician, but like now these days, I think more and more soloists are embracing chamber music, and I think that's a good thing. So that's
absolutely fantastic. What you say is so right. And I yesterday actually I was realizing that to another level, where even opera is chamber music in some ways. Because I think it was a Fischer Dieskau interview where they were talking about his doing opera roles. Of course, he's famous for his leader performances and recordings and all that. But he said that he felt that there was no difference between opera and songs. Because it's just music. It's just all these conventions that sometimes go around that, or opera singers, them needing to play or sing in a certain way or being like the star or something, but it has nothing to do with the music. I mean, sometimes it can be very exciting and make it, and then so I went to listen to some Disco Verdi arias or something, and it was amazing hearing that. It was very powerful actually in a not so operatic way, but him like analyzing the text. And I guess the purpose of music is always the same, I feel, no matter what it is, whether it's chamber music or solo or opera, or many Mozart concertos are chamber music too. And I feel like that's something that comes. Sorry, I'm talking too much, but I guess it is a podcast.
It's about you, so please.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with pianists it's harder because as a cellist, for example, yourself, or you always have to play with a pianist and you play sonata, or you play string quartets, and it's just part of what you do.
Right.
And for some reason, pianists do that less. It's either they're called accompanists, which is a term that whatever, or they're soloists and they won't play with them.
Right.
And I don't think that's necessarily the way, in my opinion, but there's many opinions about it, and they're acceptable.
Well, and the thing is, I really kind of wish we got rid of the idea of an accompanist role, or that word in general, because I think even if you're playing concertos with orchestra, I mean, there are a lot of the literature, as you obviously know, the orchestral role is just as important as the piano or whatever solo instrument, right? Like it works because they're unified, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, I feel like we need to stop thinking about like things in a soloist hierarchy, accompanist down here kind of thing, and it's kind of like together. I feel like,
so as a pianist, and many pianists will love you're saying that sort of thing. But I mean, I feel like it's more like a logistical term rather than a musical term.
That's true.
And it's not, I feel like maybe it's but it's also hard for me to say because I'm biased as a pianist. If I hear a performance, I don't know, even someone as incredible as Shafran as a cellist. I don't know if you like it. I know he's very extreme and all that. But it's always funny because no matter who he plays with, then the piano is behind him with the lid closed and like not doing much. And it's kind of a funny concept.
Yeah.
Which I enjoy it always more whenever the pianist has more texture and there's more energy coming from the piano. And I mean, it just, I guess it's all of this is just looking at the music. It is like that.
No, that's very interesting. And now kind of going into the topic of performance, the pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin once said in an interview, and I believe it was for Living the Classical Life, and he said, quote, he doesn't view performance as an exhibition, but as an offering. Talking about more an offering to the audience. What is your personal philosophy on performance, and how does that philosophy help with performance anxiety, if that's a thing for you?
That's a great question too, and I love that quote. I think it's spot on. I mean, it's a great philosophy to have because it's I guess it's kind of strange when dozens of people are sort of sitting there looking at you and like with their full attention when you walk on stage with this piano, and it does feel like an exhibition or like you're being challenged or something like that. But it's dangerous to forget what the purpose of a concert really is, or the fact that everyone's sharing the experience and that everyone loves the music,
right?
And it's not about showing off, I guess. I mean, it's I don't know, in a way that philosophy can make you feel even more stage fright because you feel like if you fail something, you don't just fail yourself, but you fail the music and you fail the audience and you fail everyone. So I don't know, it's, and I guess regarding stage fright, I get stage fright almost every time, and I almost feel like some healthy fear or even just fear, like having some adrenaline can actually help you focus better if you can use it well or get into the music better.
Agree,
but you definitely cannot let fear run the show.
Yeah.
Because then
That's a great way
it
to
would be
put it.
a disaster. Yeah,
Right.
it's not what it's all about.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit about acceptance, I guess.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get to a point where you trust your preparation, which is hard if you didn't prepare enough.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But then on the other hand, what is enough? You always wish you had another month.
Right.
So it's kind of a tricky subject that I think many people avoid, or you just cope with. And it's funny because you cope with it once and it may go great, and then you have to cope with it again from level 0 on the next day. It's not that doing it once will help you doing it, that you do it again, you'll just get more experience, I guess, on how to cope with it.
Yeah.
But I think it's you have to sort of learn to accept it. And I one consolation that one gets is that I know a lot of the artists that I admired the most and who play 50 times better than me still have stage fright that is probably worse even than mine.
Yeah.
So hearing some stories of people having to push Rachmaninoff into the stage, or even someone as godly as Argerich being so scared of going on stage. Radu Lupu, I heard, had to sometimes take shots of hard liquor before going on stage because it goes on and I don't know. So I feel like sometimes actually having a routine before going on stage, it doesn't change anything, but the placebo effect can help you cope with it. Definitely. Or just do your thing without being too.
Yeah. Sorry. And I think with nerves, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I try to treat nerves as, aside from like the rare case where you're just like super unprepared and that's the reason for your nerves. Aside from that, I try to treat nerves as a reminder that you're about to go do something important. And that I think that can apply to things outside of music, but certainly in music, right? And kind of going back to the idea about performance philosophy, because I think with this current age of like social media and with just we're more visually stimulated as a society. So I think a lot of artists try to, or have this sense of pressure to kind of visually be fulfilling to the audience on stage sometimes. And not that's certainly a way to get people to concerts, right? So I think that's fine. But I think, it's interesting because I think, personally speaking, as a performer, we're really the liaison from the composer and the music to the audience, right? So if we think of it that way, I feel like we're really kind of the low man on the totem pole, right? It should really be the composer, audience, and then like us. But I think in this current society and generation, I feel like we've kind of flipped it up. Yeah. And
audience and composer.
And I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, I certainly think you're someone that isn't like that. Obviously, I think you go against that grain, and you obviously always put the music first. But I'm sure you've seen colleagues, and I've seen colleagues that are very much about the show.
It's funny. I mean, well, first of all, regarding the previous question, that's a much deeper take on stage fright than I have. So it is true that if you're doing something important, you would be nervous, and it's normal. So it's not nothing bad. But regarding the show, I mean, I guess it's also it's a great question because it's in a way, I mean, a performance anyway, it has a visual aspect to it, right? It's still like theater, or something that you wouldn't walk into the stage with like a t-shirt and flip-flops, or be too casual, and there's certain gestures, I guess, in the music that they start maybe before you even play a note, and may start in a physical way. Like I'm sure if you played the same thing in two different ways, but like with the same sound, but like physically with a different gesture, it would affect how you play the rest of the phrase, and it would affect how the audience perceives it. That's one part of it. But I think we're sometimes you just see things that are just they're like, there's the visual effect or visual aspect to it that has nothing to do with the music.
Right.
And I feel like if there's no music or if there's nothing behind it, then it's just there's nothing to listen to. So you're absolutely right. I guess it's happened for many years and for many decades, but now we have social media and we have, everyone can record performances much more, and it's more apparent and it's more dangerous too for people. And I guess sometimes we also think that we have to draw younger audiences, as you said, and that involves. So I guess I don't really have a problem with that, but if it substitutes the music, then that is a problem.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
And I don't know. I mean, everyone can deal with it their own way, and it's fine. I feel like it's hard enough to approach a piece of music and try to communicate it to the audience or do something with it. So, but some people are able to incorporate that so well into their playing, and it's, I guess something else comes through if someone does it in a very genuine way.
Yeah.
And humanly, I think the audience will appreciate it, and sort of it may make even more convincing what they do. But when it's fake or when it just has nothing behind it, then it's just it's such a pity. And people sometimes can be misguided and all that. I don't know. It's a good question. And maybe I went too far the other way at times, and sometimes I had problems with my posture, and that maybe comes from a lack of consideration for that visual element, and that's or maybe, well, I don't know where it comes from. It's a psychological thing, but it's, I guess there's a good balance to have. I mean, so many pianists in the past had a great, like if you look at Rubinstein, so often just sitting straight. Like there's a Faya recording where it's like this Rite of Fire, I think it's called, and he's like bouncing his hands, like looks like a dinosaur, almost going above his head. But from almost everyone who heard him, I heard that his stage presence was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that, of course, didn't go by itself. Like his sound, no one could reproduce, and there was something so dignified about that. It would sort of make the audience enter the music in a way that no one else was able to achieve. Or then you look at Horowitz, who doesn't move at all, sitting there, and yet what he does with his fingers is the music that comes out of the piano is again like it's an entire orchestra. And it's sort of it's something that you don't get from audio recordings. I guess it's, I hope that's not lost. I mean, I feel like technology is, I'm going on a tangent, but technology has had a great positive impact, and also maybe a more negative impact in that, anyone can play anything any and then you can see it on Instagram. And then a lot of people will think that's great. And, and it's the danger that we will become more superficial maybe, and have lower attention spans, and I don't think that's good for society. Because I mean, to do anything well, you need to maybe develop some attention skills. I mean, says someone who had no attention skills when I was a kid. That's from personal experience. But then I guess we can use technology well too. And now you can hear all these good recordings, or we're speaking on Zoom right now, and you can see your face as I'm talking to you, which is so it's also very easy to be a pessimist, and that's also not nice. But I guess we have a responsibility in what we do.
Speaking of performance though, I want to quickly ask you about programming, because I think, I mean, when you're playing with orchestras, obviously more or less, I'm sure they just kind of ask what concertos you can play, and that's but in recitals, oftentimes you have like this blank slate, and you have this opportunity to kind of create your own art form within the program. So I'm curious as to like how you go about programming a recital when they say whatever is open, like you're more than welcome to play anything.
Well, I guess that's a great question. There's the logistical aspect to it. Obviously which pieces you're playing that year, or if you have time to learn it, or if you're playing something else. But then I found with time that the best way to the more you plan in advance, the better it ends up turning out.
Yeah.
So I get to the point now where I'm thinking of what, if there's a piece I really want to learn, I already sort of figure out the program for this season and maybe for next season. So I think maybe I'll do that in 2 seasons if I have recitals to play. Hopefully, you never know. But I think planning in advance is key for that. So that you can also learn a piece like well before you have to play it. Right. Ideally, even a year before. It's often not like that, but because stress will be there on stage no matter what. But if you have to learn something very fast, it's a little dangerous. I don't know. I feel like you need some time to get to know a piece and for the piece to sort of get to know you. That sounds very weird.
Yeah. No, that you're right.
But yeah, it's one thing to learn it to a point where you're not limited by what your hands can do. Yeah. So you know it well enough. And then you can play it. But then some pieces take some time to get into your system and for you to start understanding it at a deeper level or developing ideas further, exploring endless opportunities. And every piece is different. Right. But I think your question was more regarding how to make a concert program. And that's another interesting thing. I mean, I try to play pieces that I want to play, that I really want to play, because you engage probably much better, at a much deeper level. But on the other hand, I've had experiences where I played pieces that I maybe a teacher recommended or that I had to play for a competition or that I thought would go well. And I thought, maybe try it. I never thought of it. And I really didn't like listening to the piece. Yeah. And then I learned it and it becomes one of my favorite pieces, or maybe a piece that suits me best. Yeah. So it's tricky to know oneself, a bit like we were saying at the beginning. Yeah. You have to be, sometimes I trust more what other people say from my playing than what I feel. If, and then I just try to maybe consider, what pieces go well with each other, but then also not, I feel like, for example, Bach, you could get away with doing an entire half or even a whole recital of Bach would be fine. But certain other composers, maybe not, unless you're Brother Lupo or someone, or you have something so special to say that even if you played 3 notes, it would be worth listening to. Right. So it's a juggling act. Sometimes also presenters insist on certain things, and you have to consider what you can't play in a certain place or another. But I try to really be honest to myself and just be insistent with what I want to play. So it's fun sometimes to make a theme or a thread for the recital. And for example, if you play Beethoven 111, pretty clear you probably should end the concert with that, because what are you going to play after it, right? Right. But then
is that the Hammer Clavier? Remind me.
Or... So that's the final sonata that Beethoven wrote, then C minor.
Okay.
But it's also late style.
Right.
Clavier. Yeah, and it's it has this arietta as a second movement that's it's very long, and in C major is sort of a maybe a goodbye to the sonata form from Beethoven, and it's so charged in a certain way that it would be hard to play something after, in my opinion. But then, what do you play in the first half? I feel like also there's certain composers that go well with each other. Yeah. And you maybe how styles match, or it's not so different than, it's a whole job by itself. I guess in a museum, it would be a whole, task for a person to decide which paintings go together, or the orchestra programming season, the person who programs the orchestra, well, the conductor, I guess, helps, but there's a lot of things to consider that are not up to the people who actually play. Right. So it's a bit of a schizophrenic job. You have to separate and take some distance. Right. Times. Yeah. But being obsessive a little bit, that also, if I get into a phase where I'm really playing this composer or another, I'll just program it and sort of decide. I don't know how it is for you, or if you have a piece that you really want to play, do you go ahead and learn it, or?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's a little different for us as string players, because we don't have so many, violinists have more short pieces that aren't sonatas, obviously, but like for cello, a lot of the recital rep is just the great sonata literature. And it's really interesting. I was thinking about this earlier because the late great violin teacher Aaron Roseanne.
Oh yeah,
Have you know him?
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And he did an interview with the Violin Channel like 10 years ago, like in the early days of the Violin Channel, and he was talking about how he was really kind of frustrated with how violinists were programming their recitals because they would just basically stuff a bunch of sonatas. And you know, he was saying like back in the day, like violinists, you start out with like a Mozart sonata, then you do like some Bach, and then in the second half you do like show pieces and X, Y, and Z. Like it's very diverse, right?
Yeah.
And and I'm curious because like, the reason I asked was because I think, you know, programming is so unique. Like it really, I think the way you program a recital really kind of shows what kind of, or who you are as a musician. And I really like what you said earlier about how you like to program pieces that you believe in or that you really like, because I think it's almost disingenuous to try and play pieces that you're not so in love with, you know, like it's just like, oh yeah, I'll just kind of play it, you know, but
it's it's a great point actually. What you say is very true with the artistic personality. Like if you look at two pianist examples like Horowitz and Radulopu, like Radulopu could play 3 Schubert sonatas in a concert, and that would be a concert.
Right.
And Horowitz would often play just short pieces, one after the other, and play them so well, and both would be great, and they sort of suit their strengths.
Right.
So much so it takes some maturity to know what you can do better or not. But I feel like it's nice to have at least a major piece or two. Yeah. And there's also, as young people, we get so much advice and sometimes conflicting advice on what you have to do.
Right.
You know, like I'm sure you've had the experience, and I've definitely had that experience with, you know, someone thinking something and then another person calling you and being like, what is this? Why are you not? Or being someone was saying, if you play in a certain country, if you don't play a major piece or 2 major pieces, they're going to start criticizing you online or something. So,
oh my gosh,
it's kind of a funny. And then when you're young, I guess there's the subject of competitions, which is a whole, like sometimes that restricts what you're going to play or not in the season itself, because you don't have time to learn new things or because. But I don't know. I personally, I guess that was the question. I'm talking a lot about general things. Personally, I still go back and forth, but I try to also sometimes I start learning a piece and maybe I learn it, but I don't program it. Or something, because I feel like it doesn't fit the program, or maybe it's not the time to play it or something. But it's also nothing wrong with learning music and not performing it.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe, who knows, maybe in 20 years, I will. I mean, I haven't played Chopin in many years for solo piano. And there's various reasons for that, but I just feel like it's not the time.
Okay.
For me, then it's there's no reason. There's plenty of people playing Chopin amazingly well.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not that I don't like it. I love listening to Chopin.
Right.
And I admire a lot of my colleagues how they play it. So
no, speaking
it goes
of
in phases a little bit.
Speaking of competitions, so you've had success in various competitions like the Montreal, the Naumburg, and YCA, among others. And I'm curious as to your take, because I mean, as string players, I mean, a lot of us do it, but I mean, I think there's more leniency for string players to have a career without having done competitions. But I feel like for pianists, it's literally like a necessary evil where you kind of have to for various reasons, right? So can you just talk a little bit about like your views on it, and also like your preparation process, like how far in advance do you prepare?
Start preparing?
Like
yeah. I mean, I've had some successes and a lot of failures too, like everyone in competitions. It's also a good question, because no one has a definite answer. You kind of have to find it by yourself. And definitely, if you talk about career, which I guess Simon Rattle said is not a musical term, so it's nothing to do with the music, but a lot of people have somehow managed to forge career paths without entering a major competition. Other pianists had to win 3 in a year and then have the biggest career ever.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I mean, I'm 26 now, so I still have a few years where I could do them, but I remember when I was younger, I would be doing them and feel like it was like a life or death thing, and if I did well, I would have a great career, and I could have the opportunity to do so.
Right.
And then if I didn't do well, I was worthless, and and I realized, seeing more and more competitions and what comes into play in them, that is not always the case, or very often is not the case.
Yeah.
Because there are so many variables that are sort of out of your control. So I get the temptation still to apply to some, but I don't know. It's such an intense process whenever you're involved in one of them, and it's such a I can't use swear words, but it's such a mind screwing thing. Because I mean, we were speaking about it before, like stage fright and anxiety. Like if you think that it's an offering, and not a exhibition, right? Then certain things are implied by that. And you think, the audience loves music, and that's true. But then in a competition, you're literally being compared to a bunch of other pianists, by people who are listening to every note, and you have less room for mistakes or failure. And yet the thing that matters, I think, is still the music. So the only way to do well in a competition would be if you really care about the music, but having everything else as a complete package. And I know my weaknesses. I mean, like, there's weaknesses maybe I don't know, but you know them the older you get, and the more you encounter them, and the more you. So I found myself in competitions knowing what my weaknesses were, and then listening to other pianists and seeing how their weaknesses are. I don't know what their weaknesses are, but their strengths are exactly my weaknesses at times. And just starting getting horrified and thinking, why am I here comparing myself to them? And I don't know, it's something that it's a necessary evil, as you said. I guess it's also kind of dishonest to say you shouldn't do them, or that they're worthless, because I guess without competitions, I most of the work and the concerts that I have, I wouldn't have. And also I learned a lot from them. And they opened a lot of doors. Actually, I have to be honest with YCA. It's been, they can be quite life-changing. So it's something you just have to do. But I guess if you can detach yourself a little bit from the process, or just prepare as much as you can. I don't think you can prepare enough. I feel like the competitions I did worst at, or that didn't go so well, I felt that I was not so prepared, and I maybe started a month or 2 before, or it's not, everyone has their own way of doing it, but for me it's not enough. I feel like you need to be on stage and be so prepared that everything else doesn't bother you. It's like you're bulletproof, and then everything else comes after. But I don't know, there's a larger question of whether this setting, which doesn't really allow you to take risks so much or experiment, it can be quite inhibiting in your will of actually expressing the music. You can literally block that, and then you start fighting that, and it takes a lot of strength to do them.
Well, and it's also because, like, with a lot of international competitions, as you obviously know, it's like 4 hours of music sometimes, right? With like 2 full recital programs. Certain competitions, there's a Mozart concerto round, and then you might still have to play 2 more concertos with orchestra in the final round, or and it's just, I can't imagine the stress that goes into trying to prepare that amount of music and
at that level.
Exactly. It's I don't know.
It's stressful, and then it's happened before. You get to the final, and you don't have the concerto, so exactly so ready, and you're tired, and you're not sleeping, and I feel like that's one of the challenges. But that's also, that can help you have so much music in your hands that you can program in the next year. So I feel like there's positive things to get out of them too, and the more positive you your attitude is, the better. And I feel like if you don't have, well, you enter a competition obviously for someone to win,
Yeah.
right? Even if if you believe you're not going to, you sort of have to be motivated and believe that you can.
Right.
But if you expect that you will and you think that is a failure, otherwise, I feel like that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because a lot of it is also out of your control. I mean,
Right.
I've sometimes played in a way that I thought was not good at all and advanced,
Mm-hmm.
and seen other people better than me not advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes some occasion I remember playing probably some of my best ever and then not advancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's that's fine. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and this is a nice segue to something else I wanted to talk about, because Albert, what I really love about watching you play is the way you're so vivid with like your imagination and the way you perform and the way you bring whatever piece you're playing to life. And so I really appreciate that with your many different colors and just imagination. And I'm curious, when you're working on a piece individually or personally, how do you go about that process of bringing that music to life? Are you more analytical, or are you already kind of putting imagery in your head to kind of help relate to the music? Or
well, thank you. That's also you're very kind so far. There's plenty of people I'm sure that don't like my playing or that don't find it, but I really means a lot that you see that in my playing, because it's I guess what I value more. I mean, maybe it's determined by it doesn't mean I do it well or not, but I really value that. And I feel like I guess it's a complicated process. Well, it is, and it's very personal for everyone.
Yeah.
Because you in order to play a piece well, you have to analyze.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way around it.
Sure.
You have to, again, not be limited by your hands. So you need to work hours and hours. It's kind of like sometimes like carving a piece of wood, or picking at a stone or something, just for a long time. Yeah. Analyzing everything you're doing physically, and more importantly, analyzing what you think the music is about, the structure, and yet that is also a recipe for disaster if you only have that, because that's not what matters in the music. Well, that matters, but it's not the primary thing.
Yeah.
So you have to have both. If you only go with your intuition, it will be a disaster.
Yeah.
And if you only have analysis and all this, then it's not going to be a performance. And I've had that. I remember, especially when I was younger, where I would have phases of being obsessed with this detail and this detail, and then bring it to my lesson, and the teacher being like, "What have you practiced this week? What have you been doing?" So you sort of find a way. I was looking at some. It sounds like a random quote, but some Goya paintings. the Spanish painter. There were some prints. This was a few days ago in Chicago, and I saw this one. I thought they're very interesting because they're very satirical at times and like a sort of a commentary on society. But this one, I think, was satirical about himself. And they were very dark and sort of very uncanny at times, but it was him on a piece of stone. It's quite famous, with some deadly birds and his bag is in black and white.
Yeah.
And there's this funny quote in Spanish saying that the dream of reason creates monsters. And it has to do with his I guess his attitude to painting and with himself. And then he actually wrote the longer quote explaining that art is nothing without imagination, but you need to marry analysis and imagination to make everything work. And I feel like with a performance, it's kind of the same,
right?
Because it's kind of a detective work. The score doesn't have all the information in it, but it has probably all the information that you need,
right?
With good composers. So you need to think hard about what it is, but then ultimately you need to play the piece with the same commitment and emotional reaction as you had when you first opened it. So with piano, I guess that you can give examples, that there's endless examples, and it would be difficult to go into one of them or the other, but I guess trying to understand the language of a composer too. And I feel like the ideal way for me, I find more and more is if you sort of have you need to try a lot of things.
Yeah.
Just try. You don't lose anything by trying.
Right.
You can always discard it if it's not good.
Right.
But if you don't try anything, you don't know what's appropriate or what's not. And then actually having various options, and you need to have very concrete things that you do, with a pedal or with your hands. But in a performance, I feel like the more improvised it feels, the better it is. So if you actually have a lot of options and you choose on the spot what to do, and then that determines what you do after, I feel like you can sort of nurture a storytelling quality to the music. That's the ultimate goal. And then sort of as if you were making it up on the spot, sort of with the same spirit as the composer had when he was writing it.
Right.
But of course, our job as performers involves all these other things, because I could be very touched by the music and try to play the piano, and I wouldn't know how to do it. So there's this whole professional side to it that's difficult. So I always try to. Sometimes I lean too much into the other way, and I make a lot of mistakes because I'm taking too many risks, or trying to use too much imagination, or not sticking to the plan, and that's not good either. Right. So you have to find the middle point.
Well, and I'm curious, like when you're performing, like in the moment, are you thinking about anything specific like that helps you bring out the music more, or is it more like, oh, I just need to focus on certain aspects, or how does that
you sort of it's the great question. You have to split your brain into because the more you know the dangers of each passage or certain things you have to think about, and then trusting your hands and trusting yourself. Well, I guess so. You have to do that, but then you also have to be listening, and I mean, sort of listening to what you just did, listening to what you're doing, and then sort of feeling deep inside your gut what you're going to do after what's coming. So you're everywhere at the same time. And then I guess the ultimate goal is to not have your brain interfere with anything you're doing. So sort of be connected to the music at such a level that you sort of, but that's very hard to achieve. I don't know. It's always like a surviving sort of fight. But if you know the music enough, it's possible. Then sometimes I also feel like that having an audience there is almost essential as a component. For me, it's not for everyone, and I envy for the people for which it's not. But I feel like it's sort of, even if there's a lot of people and there's a lot of silence, that can be the biggest dose of energy that you need, because you know that they're listening, and then it's like a conversation with them, or you're sharing what the composer wrote with them, and they're listening. So it's like I don't know, if you were a messenger and I was talking to you and you were looking at your phone or doing something else, it would be kind of a turn off, and it would be hard to focus. So there's that component too. I don't know, but I find that's what's great about music to me. I feel like if that was not there, it would lose so much of, to me, makes it great. That's what happened in the pandemic, I guess, to a great extent.
No, and I'm just partly the reason why I asked this question is I'm actually like not the most analytical person. Like, so oftentimes what kind of inspires me with music is just like coming up with imagination or imagery in my head, or even just like within certain phrases, or even sometimes using like a previous memory from the past and having that kind of be like the inspiration point for a certain passage. And I was just curious as to whether that's something that you also kind of play with in your head.
Oh, definitely. I think that's a great tool for to bring the music to life or something. I guess if you do that in the practice room a lot, I mean, unless you're a genius and so incredibly talented that you think of an image and you depict it immediately, actually it's I guess it's not possible to do it just on stage. But if you do it in the practice room, that's probably the best way to go about it, because you can try different things and see what gets closer to that image in terms of, I don't know, voicing of a passage, or how the transition should be, where to take time, what's important in the music. I don't know. There's so many examples of things, and of course I've had that from my teacher
Yeah.
before, or from teachers, where they sort of see an image that you didn't have in your head at all, and suddenly it's like the only way you can see this passage because it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But I think that's that's the ultimate goal. You can tell stories through pictures too.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's also because I guess the way we relate to the outside world is normally not through music. I mean, of course, there is always sound around you, but it's not music. but so
John
many.
Cage.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's or a lack of sound, maybe. But it's like, maybe this is too philosophical, but like we're always, in our waking days, we're always seeing things, and often they can be extremely moving. So if you associate those emotions or how you felt, that's a common point with music, and it can actually unlock some connection, inspiration, and connection to the music. So it's a very smart way to go about it, I think.
Yeah. And so, Albert, I'm curious because in the 2 times that I've been fortunate enough to be able to see you perform, both times you both times you I remember distinctly talking a little bit to the audience about the music that you were about to perform. So I'm curious, why do you think the skill of public speaking is important to have as a musician in the 21st century? And also, I'm curious if YCA or other management have given you any help in that.
Oh, they have. I remember at some point early on before the pandemic, and it's something that's definitely encouraged. I think it's sort of course, I mean, talking is no substitute for playing. That goes without saying. It doesn't matter how good a speech you give if you if you don't play well. It's you might as well. But I think, well, it helps. It can help connect with an audience. As a performer, and if you really have something to say, or you did with a purpose, I think it can even enhance the experience of the audience in the concert. But it's funny because at the same time, probably the artists that I admire the most from the past, they would sort of walk on stage with like this, not even with a smile, and sort of like bow and just get to the music. So I guess it doesn't, that doesn't mean you'll play a better concert or something, but I think it's part of what we should show an effort for sort of appreciating the audience and helping them connect with the music better. Because, well, I've heard that so many times after concerts or backstage, where people were like, oh, especially with music that is not as tonal or as easy to take in, where they were like, we appreciate it so much, hearing what the music was about, and we could hear this or that, or I guess there were always program notes to the past and now. So I think also maybe people enjoy having a personal connection to the artist from the stage, because it's such a weird thing we do. We're playing this instrument, and they were normal people like anyone else. So and then maybe sometimes if you have something to share, it can be interesting to learn something else about the music. It's not just from the sound. But it's definitely encouraged, and I think it sort of ties into a larger question of what our role is in society nowadays, and we should make an effort to, build audiences, to help music education in any way we can, and to sort of not educate people sounds patronizing, because I don't think you need an education to enjoy classical music. It just speaks to the soul directly, but I think it helps, and a lot of people who go to concerts nowadays did study music when they were younger, and they quit, and they know something about it, so I think it's important, and I get told a lot, the more you do it, the better. So
well, and I think kind of like what you were saying earlier is because as a performer, when you're on stage, regardless of what stage you're on, there's almost like this kind of distance between the performers and the audience, and so it's almost like there's this invisible barrier between the performer and the audience. And I think if you're able to speak to the audience, that makes the whole concert going experience more human, and I think that's why I personally think more performers should be encouraged to give talks, or even if not in the concert, I really think pre-concert talks with performers, for the
Mhm.
audience members to come early.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think those are
Yeah,
all really important. So,
yeah, yeah. I
um,
think so too. Actually, I'm remembering now.
mhm.
I I think at Juilliard it was a requisite for your recital, graduation recital. You need to give a speech
Oh, okay.
also at some point. But the music to, and I hope I'm not, maybe I'm wrong about this or
Mm,
something, but it's um yeah, I think everything you say is absolutely on yeah, on the
mm,
on the
mm.
on the spot, on the
Yeah.
dot, or however it's called. Yeah, spot on. That's it.
Spot on.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
It's
And
funny. Yeah.
mhm. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was thinking. Um, well, this is it's tied down. Maybe we should shouldn't show this. But I think you know when you watch a basketball game, there's always
Yeah.
a commentator explaining
Right.
to you what's happening.
Right.
Or when you like in as in that's not even that's an exhibition, but it's another.
Yeah.
But in opera also you have the text and like always subtitles. When you
Mm,
watch a movie, you know it's the same. So it helps if someone, especially the performer, walks you through
yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Um, and it's I was thinking the concert, there's a space for this formality of the concert, you know, where people make time and they sit
Yeah.
down and they listen, and it's like you see the music. And that's
Yeah.
but on the other hand, let's also not forget. I mean, in the 19th century or even the 20th century, there were all these salon settings or
Yeah.
Schubert
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah.
sure people would be talking
Right.
normally and they would talk about the music, I'm
Yeah.
sure, or
Yeah.
introduce a new piece and then play it in sort of more salon setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that suits a lot of the music that we play in recitals
Right.
or in chamber music. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's a great point because I feel like, I mean, of course, classical music is a revered art form, but in some ways, I feel like we've kind of put it too high on a pedestal. And
Yeah.
what you were saying
Yeah.
earlier about, like,
Yeah.
Mozart and other composers, you know, they performed in like more intimate settings, and they, you know, had food and drank, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how they introduced a lot of their works. And I think
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Yeah.
It's yeah, you're right. It's like that. And it's the same goes sometimes with working with certain composers, and that's why the score is everything is important, but it's not everything.
Right.
Not everything is in the score, right?
Right.
So I've heard, I don't know if it has to, but Rachmaninoff often plays pieces ignoring his own markings, and he's probably the best pianist that ever lived, or one of the best, right?
Right. Right.
So it's dangerous to take some things too literally, or to,
Yeah.
on the other hand, like ignoring markings for no good reason is
Right.
obviously it's like
Right.
you know
Yeah.
not acceptable. But it's not an easy job.
Yeah.
Or well, job is not the right word. An easy
Easy task.
undertaking.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
undertaking.
easy task.
I like undertaking better.
Easy, well, I know it sounds more pretentious.
No, no, it's
I
just
know.
right. Just right. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and so kind of segueing to something else,
Mhm.
in regards to speaking. I know when you travel, oftentimes you give master classes if you can,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
fantastic. I'm curious as to your background in teaching. If you have any students now, I mean, I'm sure you're so
Yep.
busy, so
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Yep.
But also just your general teaching philosophy.
That's a great question because I will start teaching more next year.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's hard to teach. I
Yeah.
found that from from doing it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's very enjoyable, and it's very fulfilling too. But yeah, it's hard to. Um, I realized how good my teachers had been, or
Yeah.
like how because of how hard it really is. I feel like it's a little bit about, I guess, helping a student find his own path and
Yeah.
providing them with the tools to do it
Right. Right.
at any level. So if someone's really just starting, there's very obvious things that need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
But I feel like those still apply at a higher level, and it must be. I guess it's different with each student. I mean, you want to provide maybe, hopefully, some inspiration, or make the students see something in the music that they didn't see, or
Mm,
there's also the practical aspect of what they're doing, and
mm,
often there's very obvious help that you can
right.
provide here or there, or
Right.
but I I think it ties also a little bit with this. I feel like you can sometimes solve a technical problem with an image, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Like if you have a really clear will of what to play or what to express in your ear,
Mhm.
often your hands will find a way, or that should come first, and then
Yeah.
you need to work out how to do it with your hands.
Sure.
This problem.
Yeah.
So I try to um, encourage them to explore,
Mhm.
to know more about the music, to keep trying things, and to also learn how to listen to themselves.
Yeah.
Which is also a very hard thing to do. But and often it's hard for the student to trust the teacher. Like
Right.
often you may say something and they may say yes, but maybe they don't believe.
Mm.
So I think that when something feels right or feels better, from my experience, the student will know it, or I at least
Right.
have had it with my teachers. You sort of realize, oh, this is so. A lot of it is about giving the student information and allowing them to get there.
Yeah.
I like ultimately you should provide all the tools so that the student can do everything by themselves and learn how to listen to themselves and know what has to be worked on. But
Mhm.
it's very difficult. Obviously, it's much easier to have an ear next to you that is listening only to you and is critical and knows what to change.
Yeah.
So I aim to be that person when I teach.
Right.
But I haven't taught students on the long run, and I will start doing it
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year more
Yeah.
and at varying levels. So it's also about, I feel, maybe providing goals that are attainable, sort of,
Yeah.
so that are high enough to keep them motivated, but
Yeah.
also not so high that you're completely unmotivated and
Right.
think, well, it's impossible. Because I think it's most rewarding for students when they see progress. So
Right.
it takes
Well,
a lot of adapting from a teacher.
yeah, and I think it's interesting because I have more experience teaching privately, but you have more
Yeah,
experience teaching in master classes. And I
yeah,
think like teaching master classes is like even scarier because you have such a short amount of time.
that's
And so like
that's true.
like I'm curious, like when you're listening to kids play in a master class, are you just like you have to be like really zoned in and like making sure you really have something to say, or how do you feel about
Well,
that?
you're probably better at teaching than me
No, no,
because you've had many students. I
no.
don't know. I mean, master classes they're enjoyable. I
Yeah.
find them in a way. There's something refreshing, I guess, about listening to a student for the first time and not knowing how they actually play or what their tendencies are or something, and having this fresh take. It can be, maybe it's easier in a way because you
Yeah.
don't have the responsibility of holding their hand throughout 2 years
Yeah.
and making sure they actually get better at something, but that they enjoy getting better.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's kind of exciting to do master classes, and
Yeah.
on the other hand, also like whatever you say, sort of will sound like it's right, from the audience perspective. That's kind of
Yeah.
that's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's often it would not be. Um, it's tricky because you need to make an assessment very fast
Yeah.
about what's going on,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't know for sure what's going on.
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like the level of master classes I've given so far, it was always quite apparent what could
Mhm.
be improved to
Mhm.
me, at least. Um, maybe I was wrong. I don't know. I would love to. If someone watches this video and put it in the comments, I'll
Yeah.
uh, if I was wrong. But what I find is it makes me think for myself too, and it actually helps me practice. I
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
how to practice sometimes from teaching because you
Yeah.
have to sort of put in words something that music is so intuitive
Yeah.
times, and a lot of it is things, but you don't think I'm going to play this note,
Mhm.
and then you play the note. You sort of hear the note, you think how to play the note, and then you
Yeah.
play the note, but you do the
Right.
action.
Right.
So it's not like you have to say it before.
Mhm.
So there's this disconnect that you need to. It's much harder to teach because you have to use that to reach the student, and then the student has to do the note. It's kind of like you were saying. There's a composer, performer, and audience.
Mhm.
Between the teacher, it's
Yeah.
like composer, teacher, student,
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah.
It's just a whole new step that you
Yeah.
add, and
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
with a whole different medium.
Right.
So I found that, unlike now that I'm talking, like don't stop talking, the more concise you can be with your directions,
Yeah. Yeah.
the more you may reach the student.
Yeah.
So I found that to be the main challenge, actually,
Right.
to say things in the least words possible, and
Right.
also I found, I think sometimes if you work, I don't know, on the first page of a Mozart sonata,
Yeah.
you obviously don't have time to work on the whole thing. You can make some general, maybe one or two general comments structurally, but a lot of it can apply to the rest of it.
Yeah.
So hopefully the aim is to give them something that they can take for their own practice.
Exactly.
And then maybe the audience, if you're lucky, can take for their own practice too. Or,
Yeah. And I'm curious because you did some teaching at Juilliard while you were an AD student, right? Or
well, a lot of it was secondary piano.
Oh, okay.
Actually, a lot of people will laugh, but I've done some private.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and now I will at the Smith too. It's I find it's also very gratifying whenever, for one reason or another, the student sounds better after. It's quite a mysterious art to me. I don't know, sometimes you say something that you feel like should be very obvious,
right,
and then it doesn't get better at all, and then you say it in a different way that doesn't make sense to you, and then suddenly it sounds better,
right,
at a very basic level. I don't know. It's and I've learned a lot also from my teachers. I mean, I remember at some point I was observing lessons that my teacher was giving for a few weeks to prepare for something.
McDonald, or
yes, that's right.
Okay,
Mr. McDonald, and I mean, there's no better example.
Really.
Of course, that's at a very high level because everyone in the studio was great. It doesn't apply to most places, but in a way it does. Even in the basics. So it's hard to listen. I mean, it's hard to listen when you play, and it's hard to listen when you're teaching. But it's a big part of what we do, also in chamber music, as we were talking before. A lot of it is doing and listening. I guess.
That's fantastic. I feel like I've learned so much in this last hour.
Oh no! I hope you didn't do the opposite. Maybe
this is great, and I'm sure the listeners will find a lot of inspiration in this. Before we go, do you have any last imparting words of wisdom for any musicians out there, young or old?
Oh gosh, well, I don't think anyone should want to end up like me right now. But I think I hope they, whoever has a passion for music deep down, that nothing really gets in their way. I mean, there's hard moments and there's discouraging things and all that, but if you love music, at the end of the day, you will find a meaning of it, and it will enrich your life actually to a degree that I don't think anything else, in my experience, has. So just remember, we're very lucky, and at any level that you do it, it's we also have a responsibility, I guess, and an important role in society. I think, obviously, for example, with the pandemic, when people are dying, there's obvious priorities that go before, or in the world we live in, there's, money, politics are sort of determining the way of things. But I think music, in an invisible way, is very important for society too. I know it's easy to say, but there's a reason why it survived for so long through so many different societies and so universally in so many countries. And we have the responsibility of keeping it going and sort of nourishing the soul, whatever that is. I mean, there's so many proven benefits whenever kids learn music at any basic level, and I don't know, it's easy for me to say in my isolated way, also in a privileged position too, of, going to concerts and listening and being like so moved. It sort of gave meaning to my life. Sounds a little extreme, but I think a lot of people are very lost, and there's a lot of extremes nowadays, and music balances the soul and sort of engages the human mind, body. It sounds too philosophical, to a degree that very few things do, and we have to sort of keep that going. And also, well, in terms of, if someone is doing it seriously in music, just don't give up. We're all very bad at some point, or it goes up and down. It's not always a straight line, and we have so many disappointments, no matter what you're doing or at what level or what it is. So
that's actually a really good. Sorry.
No. I guess that's it. I should just stop. But it's
no.
Yeah, music is so precious and so valuable. We all love it, and I think there's a lot of people who deeply love it. So no one is alone.
No, that's really funny you mentioned that, or great thing you mentioned that, because I think my first year of grad school in Cleveland, it was around wintertime, so it was snowing a lot. And I was taking a theory class, and the professor was saying, I was driving to school today and I saw the people that were, shoveling snow, and, it was like really cold, obviously. And he said, and that just really, seeing them made me realize how lucky I am that I'm able to do this, and I think that's like what you were saying before. I think we really, as musicians, it doesn't feel that way in many ways, but especially during the struggles, but we are very privileged to be able to play and listen and work on these great masterpieces. So
yeah we that's, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with reminding oneself of this every single day, like every single morning, whatever. It's easy to forget, but it's very true. Yeah it's not always so easy to do that in this world. I mean, again, we're very privileged, because think of so many countries that can't even listen to music because there's no means, right? At all.
Right.
But so it's also part of our responsibility is to which we can all do more, I guess. So and I can do more, and I should do more, but I feel like we are very lucky at the end of the day. And even other professions that are more lucrative or are not always so much more lucrative to the soul, or, I don't know, or to your sanity.
Right, exactly.
Maybe it's too much. You can do anything and be like fulfilled to the maximum level, but yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
thank you so much, Albert. I know how valuable your time is,
you.
so I feel so grateful and lucky that we've been able to do this. So,
well, thank you for having me in your great podcast. I hope there's many more to come with many artists, and thanks for the great questions and just a fun and inspiring talk.
All right, till next time.
Thank you. Bye.